One common question that I get asked all the time from clients and from some people that I mentor is, should I quit my job in order to go full-time in property? The thinking behind this from their point of view is that it gives them more time to be able to invest, to be able to dedicate to it without the distraction of having a job. And I think also a lot of these people, it is their goal and their dream to actually be full-time in property without the restrictions and without the chains of having a job. However, there's lots of things to consider, and there's some ramifications, some serious ramifications that are important to understand before making this decision. And that's what I'm going to be talking about in this video, and then giving my opinion at the end to the question, should I quit my job and go full-time in property? So the first thing to consider is around lending. Lending is crucial to be able to move forward in your property journey, and without it, you aren't going to really go anywhere and you aren't going to be able to reach your goals. So it is a fundamental thing to consider, and it is probably the biggest factor in the question of should you quit your job and go full-time in property. If you are investing in a limited company, lenders will look to you as the director and still make an assessment on your financial position, your credit history, your income status at the time, your job status. They would assess you in the same way that they would assess you whether you were buying in a limited company or whether you were buying in a personal name. And this is something to consider. It is a bit of a myth that actually if you're investing in a limited company, lenders will look at the limited company and the income that that's bringing in on its own without looking at you as a director, and that is not actually true. So they will be looking at you as a director in a limited company, or whether you're investing in personal name. You will be assessed across all those factors that I mentioned as whether you can get a mortgage or not. And therefore, if you've not got a job, if you've not actually got another income, if you've quit your job and you've not got another revenue stream that's bringing in you an income, it is virtually impossible to be able to get a mortgage. I suppose the only way around this is to potentially invest with someone else and have two directors of a limited company, or if you're investing in personal name, to invest with someone else. However, it's still difficult to get lending. There still will be restrictions on the amount of lenders that will be available to you. And this is one of the biggest factors and one of the biggest disadvantages and restrictions that you're going to face if you quit your job and don't have another income. Next thing to think about is actually risk. You're actually increasing your risk by quitting your full-time job to go into property if you don't have any other income sources, because it means that all the pressure is on you succeeding in property and you making an income from property quickly. Even if you've got savings, to say, you might have savings that will last you 6 months, that still puts a big pressure on income that is going to sustain you from property in a very short space of time. And as I've said many times on this channel, property always takes longer than you think. That's the first thing. And really, property is a long-term game and not a get-rich-quick scheme, and not a short-term cash flow scheme. And therefore, having such a short space of time to achieve your goals is a big risk. And what I would say is about these short timelines, the pressure that you're going to put yourself under on having a short window to achieve that income goals, is that it's going to put a lot of pressure and stress on you. And normally, pressure and stress leads to worse performance. It leads to desperation and bad decision making, which ultimately means you're likely to undermine your goals because you're not performing at your best, because you're kind of acting out of desperation the closer it gets to your end point of your savings running out. And what I would also say is that you're increasing your risk here. You're not managing your risk. Actually having a full-time job and then transitioning out of it is managing the risk. It is managing your downside. To say, if you didn't achieve your goals in a certain window, that doesn't necessarily matter if you've got another income source, if you've got that full-time job. But going all in, putting all your eggs in one basket in terms of actually trying to achieve your goals in a short space of time in property doesn't allow any slack. It doesn't allow things to go wrong, doesn't allow timelines to slip, and is not a way of managing that risk. It is actually increasing your risk. The third point is you actually be in a worse position in terms of the amount of capital you have. And this is in two ways. So firstly, you'll actually be reducing your savings that you've got. Those savings could be utilized towards a deposit. If you quit your job and were living off the savings and didn't have any other income streams, you would be reducing the amount of money and the amount of capital that you have to invest. You would also be reducing the amount of savings that you could start to accumulate as well, because if you were in a job, you could actually save some of your salary and put that towards your deposit. So in two ways, you're actually reducing the amount of capital you have to invest, which obviously puts you in a much worse position. And also in terms of finances, it actually means that you need more properties than you did if you actually had a job, because if you completely quit and say you were on £3,000 a month and you wanted to replace your income, that now means that you need £3,000 income from property. But if you had a job and you decided to transition out of it by, say, going down to part-time hours in a year's time, and you only needed £1,000 from property, that's a more kind of realistic goal. It allows you to take your time a little bit and to work up to that £1,000. But if you went all in and quit, that means that you need more properties in a short space of time, and that puts a lot more pressure on you, and ultimately it means that you're likely to make worse decisions because you're making decisions kind of under pressure and having to make them in a short space of time. So here, in terms of financially, it actually puts you in a much worse position. It puts a lot more strain on your finances by quitting. So in summary, I've gone through 3 different areas to consider when thinking about quitting your job or not to invest in property full time. You've got the financial aspects to think about, you've got the risk aspects, you're actually increasing your risk by quitting, and you've also got the lending restrictions, which is quite a big blocker to have to overcome should you decide to quit. And in my opinion, it is actually possible to achieve your goals in property without having to quit your job. I think from all of the areas that I've mentioned, there is quite big disadvantages to actually making the decisions to quit, and actually advantages of quitting are actually very much outweighed by all of the disadvantages and all of the ramifications that I've talked about today. So in my opinion, I don't think it's worth quitting your job if you don't have any income from property or any other income sources, because you're basically just going to be in a much worse position, and you're actually making it harder for yourself to achieve your goals in the long term. So I think it's much more prudent to stay in your job and then make a plan to transition out of it, and maybe stagger that transition by, for example, going down to part-time hours in, say, 12 to 18 months or whatever your situation is. That is a much more prudent and risk managed approach, which should help you to firstly achieve your goals, but actually enable you to do it safely and do it without having any of the disadvantages that I've mentioned today. So I hope that helps on the question of should you quit your job and go full-time in property. I think the answer is, from my opinion, is no. It's much better to stagger your way out of it and transition your way out of it slowly. So I hope that helps, guys. Guys, if you enjoyed this video today, I'd really appreciate if you could like the video, add any comments and questions that you may have. I'd love to hear from you. And the biggest thing you could do that would help us is to subscribe to this channel. We're trying to grow it, get more content out to people like you, and knowing that there's people subscribing and liking the videos is the key metric for us to create more content. So I'd really appreciate your support, and thanks a lot.